Now, some of the salient points that our experts are going to be discussing: falling commodity prices, which have in part contributed to the falling shilling, causing us to get more expensive imports; regional conflicts in South Sudan, Burundi, and the Democratic Republic of Congo, which has impacted on Uganda's exports, worsening our balance of payments position; and more recently, the short-term impact from the elections, which came from greater government spending away from traditional expenditure areas. Now, the participants here in the room include government representatives from the government agencies, members of parliament, donor representatives, members of the academia, and civil society, among others. Now, the proceedings of this dialogue will be published in a synthesis report. There will also be some policy briefing papers on the 3 sub-themes of this dialogue. There will also be a feature in the print media. Now, if you're following us on television, also if you are in the room, you might want to tweet your contribution or question, which will be passed on to our panelists. The Twitter handle is Budget Dialogue 2016. Now, I'd like to take us through the program very briefly. We'll have welcome remarks by Mr. George Bogere from Acode. Opening remarks after that from Dr. Arthur Bainomgisha, Executive Director of Acode. Then the official opening will be undertaken by a representative of the Honorable Minister for Finance, Planning and Economic Development. Then we'll have the keynote address from Dr. Sruma. Dr. Sruma is a former finance minister. He, at the moment, is Chancellor at Makerere University. After that, we shall have a presentation from Mr. Keith Mahakanizi, long-standing member of staff at the Ministry of Finance, an economist, senior economist. At the moment, he's permanent secretary at the Ministry of Finance, Planning and Economic Development. He also is secretary to the Treasury. After that, we shall have a panel responding. Now, our panel is made up of 2 people. We have Mr. Andrew Mwenda. He's a well-known journalist. He publishes the Independent magazine. He also is, Mwenda is a regular commentator on politics and the economy. He's here with us. We also have Dr. Fred Muhumuza, former economic advisor to the Minister of Finance. He's an economist of high repute, and at the moment he lectures at one of the leading institutes, College of Business and Management Studies. He will be giving us the panel response, the response from the panel. We also have our other experts in the room who will speak to us later. After that, we'll open it to a plenary discussion, which should last about an hour. And then the session will eventually be wrapped up. We'll have responses from the panelists, the presenters, and then the session will be wrapped up by Dr. Susan Kavuma, who is also with us here. And she's a research fellow at Acode. Before we have the official closure at around 5:30, 5:15, by Dr. Arthur Bainomgisha, who is the Executive Director of Acode. Right now, I would like we're going to have a word of prayer. Henry is going to lead us into that word of prayer. Henry is walking to this place right now. And then after that, we'll hear the national anthem and get straight going. Henry.
Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this time. We thank you for this day. And we thank you for this event that we are about to take on today. We pray that you guide us and you lead us in all that we are going to discuss. Bless the discussions. We pray that at the end of the day, the discussion can be able to take us forward as a country and to bring glory to your name. In the name of the Almighty God, I pray. Amen.
Thank you, Henry. Can I request that we now stand up for the national anthem?
twaomba uilinde Jumuiya Afrika Mashariki, tuwezeshe kuishi kwa amani, tutimize na malengo yetu. Jumuiya yetu sote tuilinde, tuajibike, tuimarike. Umoja wetu ni nguzo yetu, idumu jumuiya yetu.
Thank you very much. Indeed, we may take now. I'll go through some ground rules that will govern our interactions this afternoon. Firstly, I would like to request that, because this is a live telecast and because of the intensity of the discussions, if we can switch off our phones or turn them to silent. Better if you turn them to silent so you can attend to them without disrupting even your neighbor. I would request that we minimize movements across the room. Also, when you're selected to speak, introduce yourself and keep your contributions brief and straight to the point. And finally, we will request that you stick to issues and not personalities. Right now, I would like to ask to invite Mr. George Bogere, manager at Acode, to come and give us the welcoming remarks. George.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. The Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Finance, the Chancellor Makerere University, members of Parliament present, members of the Diplomatic Corps, viewers, ladies and gentlemen, welcome. As I've already been introduced, my name is Bogere George. I'm a research fellow at the Advocates Coalition for Development and Environment, where I also manage the Center for Budgets and Economic Governance. We are indeed delighted to have you here to participate and share in the 6th annual high-level policy dialogue on the budget, organized by Acode in partnership with the Ministry of Finance, Planning and Economic Development. The theme of this year's dialogue is global economic outlook and its implications for growth of Uganda's economy. And I'm glad to tell you that Acode is committed to making public policies work for people, including the budget. Our work on the budget and economic governance aims at promoting accountability and transparency of public expenditure, as well as creating economic opportunities for men, women, and the youth. We would like to commend the efforts of the Ministry of Finance and the entire government in pursuance of these objectives. That you can spare time to be with us tonight is an indication of the value of the budget and indeed Acode's work to you. It's a pleasure to see you all here, and I wish you nice deliberations. Back to you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you, George. We'll straight away have Dr. Arthur Bainom Mujisha speaking to us. He's going to give us the opening remarks, which are going to take us deeper in some of these issues, give us an overview of the context and the context of this dialogue. Dr. Arthur Bainom Mujisha, Executive Director, Acode.
Thank you very much, Edmond. The Permanent Secretary, Minister of Finance, Economic Development, Mr. Keith Mhakanisi, representing the Minister of the same Ministry, the Chancellor Makerere University and former Minister of Finance, Dr. Ezra Suruma, my colleague George Bogere, who is the manager of the Center for Budget and Economic Governance, members of Parliament present, the technical staff from the Ministry, our distinguished panelists, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Good afternoon. I think we need to come out of the tenseness needs to please welcome to this very interactive session. It is our 6th annual high-level policy dialogue on the budget. We organize these dialogues in partnership with the Minister of Finance. I think that's what we need to recognize, because Acode, ODI, IPA, and the Minister of Finance have a memorandum of understanding to work together to promote budget transparency and budget accountability and make the budget a citizen-driven affair in this country. And on this note, I want to thank the Ministry for that confidence in Acode. We are a think tank, but they have trusted us to work with us, and sometimes we can be an inconvenience, because that is the business and the nature of civil society, to keep the governments in check, to speak on behalf of the voiceless. And so when we do business with Keith and the entire ministry, we pursue an inconvenient truth. Ladies and gentlemen, as my colleague has already mentioned, we periodically monitor the budget, especially the flow of funds from the center to the local governments. And we work in 30 districts around the country, and our memorandum allows us to track the funds and to make sure that they reach in record time. And I think today Mr. Keith Muhakans is on spot to account to Ugandans and tell us how much time it takes for the money to move from his ministry to the unit, to the end service money use at the dispensary and at the secondary school. Because we also intend to reduce that distance. Sometimes it takes a month, sometimes, but now I think with our work with them, it now takes almost a week, and we need to keep it at that. But secondly, we realized that the people are always disconnected with the budget. The budget seems to be something very far from the people, and this partnership aims to bring the people to understand the budget and to participate in the budget making process, but also to demand accountability from their leaders. So once money is released, we work with the ministry to inform the people on the grassroots that the money has come. At Acode, we have established an SMS platform, and we send messages to the people across the country that your money has been released, so that people can check for their money on the notice board and can ask and question the technical people. But most interestingly, this is an interesting time in the history of our country and across the region because of the economic turbulence among most economies. So the economies are not doing well, and my colleague talked about the conflicts in the region. The conflict in South Sudan affected us, the conflicts in Burundi, and of course the democratization process has been turbulent across the region. But also we've been consuming too much than we are producing. So today is an opportunity, ladies and gentlemen, gathered here and across the country that are watching NTV, to be able to interact with important people in the government that manage your money. And perhaps, Kate, also you could explain to Ugandans that actually they pay taxes. We have found that people with the abolition of graduated tax, they are not linked with the money. They don't think that they pay taxes, and as such, they don't demand accountability from the leaders. So, ladies and gentlemen, once again, welcome. We look forward to an interactive discussion that we think would help our economy to recover and position us to become a middle-level income country as articulated in our Vision 2040. I thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. We can give him a round of applause. Dr. Arthur Bainomjisha, Executive Director at Acode. He also is a lecturer at Makerere University, an academic in his own right. I'm going to invite right now Mr. Keith Muhakanizi, a very well-known economist, very well-known figure in national economics. He's representing the Honorable Minister for Finance, Planning and Economic Development, so he'll give the opening remarks for this meeting and then go straight away to make his presentation on budget strategy for financial year 2016-2017 and its implications for Uganda's economic growth. So he's wearing two hats. You're most welcome, Mr. Muhakanizi.
I'm not the Minister of Finance. I'm just reading the speech opening remarks of the Honorable Minister of Finance by Honorable Matia Kasaja, Minister of Finance, Planning and Economic Development. But because we come from the same place, and time is a resource which is not nowadays very common to us, I'll make a few remarks on my own to allow the dialogue to take place. So I'll not go into details of my speech, but I have an option only to read the speech of my minister. Government partners, civil society representatives, officials from government. Oh, I should have started with honorable members of parliament. I sincerely apologize. Ladies and gentlemen, I wish to welcome you all and extend thanks to Acode for organizing this very important dialogue. This dialogue provides an avenue for all stakeholders to assess the policy direction of the economy, propose strategies and public sector interventions aimed at enhancing inclusive economic growth and management. Government recognizes the importance of a comprehensive process to inform the budget process, including unemployment. I therefore wish to emphasize that the government takes recommendations of civil society organizations and other stakeholders seriously during the preparation and execution of the national budget. Global economic performance and outlook. The Honourable Minister says, today's high-level policy dialogue focuses on global economic outlook and its implications on Ugandan economic growth. In the recent past, global economy faced challenges that have had an impact on the Ugandan economy, among other countries, especially small economies of Africa. Uganda's economy is now projected to grow at 5% this financial year, down from earlier projection of 5.8%. This is on account of the following. International commodity prices, as we have had earlier on, have declined. In addition, there has been a slowdown in growth registered by our trading partners and major emerging economies, leading to significant decline in Uganda's exports. A good example, of course, is the events that have taken place over the last 2 years in Southern Sudan, which was our major market. Consequently, a decline in exports has led to a depreciation of the shilling against major international currencies, for example. That's one of the reasons. Of course, we must also take into account that over the last few years, the dollar strengthened among other currencies, and as a result, of course, resulted in the shilling, a number of currencies depreciating against the dollar. For instance, the shilling depreciated by 21% between May and September 15. Although this trend has since been reversed, Uganda's imports from its trading partners, emerging trading partners, became expensive, vast weakening of Ugandan shilling. As a result, because of the pass-on effects of the shilling depreciation, inflation rose from 4.9 in May 15 to 7.2 in September 15, reflecting, as I said, pass-through effects of the sharp depreciation of the shilling. Mainly. In addition, further inflationary pressures arose from increased food crops as well as adjustments of electricity tariffs. But let me also do this. Maybe I will make it later on. Let me finish the speech of the minister. In order to anchor inflation expectations to 5%, Bank of Uganda tightened the monetary policy by increasing central bank rate. I should mention also that the shilling depreciated faster than East African countries or other countries around, faster than their currencies in depreciation. They all depreciated. Many not reflecting the fundamentals, as I said earlier on, but reflecting sharp, speculation arising out of all of you speculating that the government was going to overspend in face of election. Consequently, credit to the private sector, they climbed to around 12% in February 16, from 14.2% in January 16, driven by weakening demand for credit due to a rising interest rate. When he tightened monetary policy, interest rates went up, and as a result of this, we see weakening credit to the private sector. However, raw international oil prices have stemmed domestic inflation despite the depreciation pressures. The short-term inflation outlook is therefore expected to improve slightly, mainly due to exchange rate and food price developments. Despite of the above, the successful completion of 16 general elections has played an important role in restoring investor confidence. This has been particularly visible in the recent strengthening of the shilling. Inflation has been particularly visible in the recent strengthening of the shilling, and inflation rate has consequently dropped 6.2, improved inflows from exports have also come up, and NGO remittances and offshore investments and reduction of the central bank rate have happened in recent past, among others. So we see a whole change of the environment that we are operating in, getting more favorable than it has been, say, 9 months ago. Measures and interventions to strengthen the economy. After tightening monetary policy, Bank of Uganda has started a gradual and careful timed easing cycle, whatever English. I grew up in a village. To this effect, CBR rate reduced to 16 in April from 17, registered in February 16, and we expect it further go down in the immediate future. Government intends to undertake a shift in the composition of financing over the medium term towards lower debt to reduce our debt servicing costs, help balance our foreign exchange requirements, and ensure healthy private sector credit growth. In addition, the recent enactment of the public PPP Act is expected to provide a strong platform for leveraging private capital in support for key public infrastructure through financing interventions to an investment and value addition to strategic commodities while sustaining investments in infrastructure and critical social services. Looking ahead, the major sector priorities in the new 5-year term remain focused on structural change agenda, particularly improving productivity in key sectors such as agriculture, manufacturing, and tourism. In 16-17, real economic growth is projected to recover to 5.5% and further to an average of 6.3% per annum over the medium term. This will be driven by increased public investment in infrastructure, recovery in domestic demand, and increased private investment on account of monetary policy easing, as well as a rebound on the international commodity prices. In order to facilitate the process of improving the quality of services offered by government ministries, departments, and agencies, the budget for 16-17 will focus on the following. 1. Ensuring promotion of productivity, investment, and export of goods and services through industrialization, value addition to strategic commodities such as dairy products and etc. 2. Enhancing human capital development by improving access to quality critical social services, provision of quality healthcare services, and quality education reflected in curriculum improvements and skills development. 3. Enhancing domestic revenue mobilization. The strong package of revenue measures included in the 16-17 budget is expected to significantly increase the tax to GDP ratio, which is badly needed. 4. Strengthen the operation capacity of key institutions like UNRWA, the Road Fund, to ensure proper planning, procurement, and supervision of works, among others, of course, other institutions. 5. Improving the entire government project cycle management process with specific focus on major projects like transport, energy, water, and agriculture. 6. Extension of electricity across the country through, of course, construction of major dams, which you know, and this is meant to provide cheap and affordable and reliable power to all those who will be in economic activity in particular. 7. Strengthen the development and maintenance of strategic infrastructure, as I have already said, as well as connectivity to regional markets for exports, e.g., hopefully we shall move forward the process of construction of the standard gauge railway from Maraba to Kampala. Strengthening government procurement through better procurement planning, enforcement of procurement regulations, e-procurement, and etc. 7. Enhancing social protection with a view of empowering men and enhancing job creation, especially among the youth. 10. Strengthen with institutions that effectively support standards, e.g. in industry and the rest. In conclusion, the Minister says, from this dialogue, we should be able to come up with appropriate recommendations to guide government to effectively implement policies necessary to address the aforementioned challenges. I wish to emphasize the importance of this dialogue and pledge continued government commitment to undertake comprehensive consultations relevant with the relevant stakeholders. This is to develop an appropriate strategy and intervention to underpin prioritization of resources. The Minister now finally says, I thank you for listening and I hereby declare this dialogue officially open. He couldn't make it, which I should have said that up front, because as you know, we changed the budget cycle to improve the efficiency of the budget. How many minutes do I have? 15. Oh, good. We changed the budget cycle. Now budget is being discussed, which is to be discussed in July, September, is now being finalized, being discussed in Parliament, and will be finalized hopefully by end of next week, to enable accounting officers and everybody to start their planning of the procurement and implementation process. That was the main purpose. So he had to rush to Parliament. But let me make, having done that, let me make, they had said that they separately make a speech. If the minister was here, I would have done that. But I think it is a wastage of your time. And so they have kindly allowed me 10 minutes to make 1 or 2 extra remarks of emphasis from what the minister has said. First, is to talk about what happened on the commodity prices. Although the minister was saying that commodity prices were have declined, which is true. The terms of trade, as the economists call it, and have not been so bad in the case of Uganda and East Africa and countries. has been very bad for countries like Nigeria, Angola, Ghana, to some extent. Those who are in oil, Zambia, those have been bad, and the Middle East. Because at this stage Uganda is not yet producing oil, it is an oil-consuming country. So when you look at the declining oil prices, together with somehow the decline in our exports, well, for sure, we have not been so badly affected by this animal which is talked over, that one. So we cannot cry too much that this has affected us, therefore we go around there. Yes, it has, but mildly. But the truth is that over time, and I just want to say this, our import bill, like most African countries, have been growing faster than exports of services and goods. As a result, what the economists call the current account deficit has been widening, and we need to do something about it. In particular, we were mainly affected over the last 2 years by the Southern Sudan war, because this was our major market, and that demand has been largely destroyed. And so we need not to cry, we need to do something that we need to do to deal with this. So that's number one. Number two, I just want to say, and I will be ready for hanging in the next few minutes, that the speculators got it wrong. My friend on is it the Sandys, is a real estate, first estate or something like that. The Andrew Mendes and the rest got it wrong. The speculation about 2 years ago was that in the face of election, we are not going to stand our ground and we are going to print money, hence shilling depreciating and inflation hitting the roof. I don't think there is any more doubt that we manage the budget, and as I'm talking, the budget is going to be implemented from within the forecast, the total amount of money expected. So as a result of this, we see a reverse of awe and confidence into the economy. I just want to make that statement because there was an overkill and which made the shilling overshoot its equilibrium. It would have depreciated, there's no question about that. And we needed it badly. We needed a depreciation of the shilling, but not at speed, which it did. Mainly that was driven not by fundamentals, but mainly by speculation. But that has been washed out because they have realized we're not going to print money. In fact, I think what's going on is the debate is that, didn't we become too tight during elections, therefore affecting all of you? And I think that's the new debate which I see is around. Thirdly, both by private sector and government, we must now start focusing urgently on how to increase our exports. And I think from budget point of view, we are starting this year shifting resources towards investing in those areas that will earn foreign exchange, either exports or services such as tourism. Now, but I just want to get off here. I want to move very fast because they said I have 10 minutes. I think one of you said I should comment on the measures we are taking to strengthen public expenditure and accountability. We have in the last 3 years implemented a number of reforms One is budget transparency. Whatever you say, Uganda is among the best in budget transparency. I don't remember any other country. I know my good friend Andrew and the press have done work which publishes every release of money. In fact, yesterday I was having a press conference releasing money. Every quarter we release money. Whether it is State House, whether it is the defense or House, we all publish it. Secondly, we are allowed to manage the budget together with, as Dr. Benumuch has said, with all of you. So don't criticize. Come on, we manage the budget together. Don't say Mwakan is our own. And Secretary Treasurer, Secretary Treasurer and his staff. It is a budget. These resources are for all of us to manage. And therefore, once we have agreed on the prioritization and focus resources there, let us all engage and manage the budget together. Because I think that's where accountability is. But having said those, what do we see on service delivery? I know all of us I think we have missed the opportunity of dealing with inefficiencies in government departments by focusing too much on corruption. I'm not saying we shouldn't focus on corruption, but I think there is just general inefficiency which we need now to focus on. And therefore, not only look at the outputs and financial accountability by the Auditor Generals and internal auditors, but focus on if I am planting 1 acre of coffee, 3 years down the road, is this coffee yielding? And if not, did it dry halfway? Of course that it can. Or this. Or if you immunize the children, you can immunize children across the board. An output will be 100%. But you may be immunizing them with water or a drug which is dead. Therefore, you will not get the outcome. And I think that's what we want to achieve. On our side, how shall we achieve this, which is our major area of reform? We believe it can be easily achieved if we all deal with the MDs, managing directors in the system. If I don't release money efficiently, I think pressure should be put on me to quit where I am. That should be true of the PS of health. It must be true of a cow in District Y, Ministry of, I don't know, gender, I don't know what these ministries or government departments. We believe there is a weak management that needs to be dealt with. On my part, as you know, I've started publishing for open debate, if it means, because I know people are very critical. If you don't account for public resources, I now publish you publicly that you have not done so, and I think I've been doing this. Secondly, we must together make sure that people get resources on time. But Dr. Benumuch had raised finally, I want to make one point on accountability. How quickly does money reach the beneficiaries? First, the major problem that was affecting service delivery was salaries and wages and pension. On what reform led by myself of salary and pension, monitored by all of you, especially for teachers, by 28th of every month, we see salaries reaching. We find out of 200 something or so institutions, about 7 salaries going beyond being paid between 29th to about 5th. And they stop there. So it's like unlike in the past. So salaries are now efficiently delivered for people to do work. But I wait. In the Wanyankore, I think in the Waroro, we have a saying that you cannot dance a record. Go on the floor, dance, play a record, dance it. Then you say, this record was very good, and I have danced it excellently. You must allow others to judge you. So I wait you to judge me whether I'm telling the truth or not. Secondly, we reformed the system from monthly release of funds. We now release on a quarterly basis to enable resources to reach the beneficiaries on time. First, we release 4/10 of, and you can write it in your head, 4/10 of July, 4/10 of October, 4/10 of January, 4/10 of April. Finish. If that one is not done, or has not been done in 3 years, I've been Secretary of Treasury, I'll retire, because I would have told the country a lie. And therefore, there is no reason why accounting officers cannot, and systems cannot implement the programs on time. Why it is not being done is something that we need to focus on as a country to achieve the intended objectives of the budget and the plan. I think I will be adding on later on. Let me stop here. Thank you very much. Okay.
All right. Thank you. We will we'll give him another round of applause for doing two things: standing in for the minister, the substantive minister for finance, planning and economic development, who was unable to come this afternoon, and then for being able to speak in his own right as permanent secretary in that ministry, also secretary to the treasury. All right, at this moment we will take a break shortly. For our viewers at home, we will get you'll be able to get back to us in a short while. I would like to recognize a few members who have joined us: Professor Augustus Nwagaba, some prominent scholars, Honorable Stephen Mukitale Birahwa, Member of Parliament, former Chairman of the Committee on the National Economy, Honorable Miriam Matembe, a prominent citizen.
News updates brought to you by Sadolin, color your world. Define Salida. Give your world a Sadolin makeover today. Sadolin, color your world.
Wanna make some cash? Just dial *185#.
Called Kopsinga Jasmine from Nigeria. I'm a senior 6 vacist and I'm doing a job per now. I'm a photographer by profession. I dialed *185# to enter the draw. I would buy airtime using *185#. Like if I have money on my account, I would dial *185# and then activate MBs. I want to thank Airtel for this offer actually. I can't even believe all this is mine.
Airtel, the smartphone network.
It's the feeling.
Governor presents Friday Night Live with Uganda's legendary Afrigo Band, featuring Uganda's freshest female sound, Winnie Nwachi. Come and party with the best on the 29th of April 2016 for only 30,000 shillings. Governor, whatever your mood, we've got the color.
Thank you very much, MC. The PSST, the Dr. Vinomicha, the organizer, and your staff, Mr. Andrew Mwenda, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, all protocol observed. I am privileged to have the opportunity to discuss this very big topic about global economic outlook and its implications for the growth of Uganda's economy. When I was a student of economics and of business cycles in particular, what later came to be known as economic fluctuations, we used to talk about exogenous causes of business cycles and endogenous causes. We'd spend a great deal of time analyzing the changes in economic activity that were due to external factors vis-a-vis the changes in the business cycle that were due to internal factors. And some people would be very passionate about external causes, such as climate change these days, war. If there was a war, certainly you expected some effect on the economy, undoubtedly. These days, I'm not sure why the organizers chose this topic. I don't know what they had in mind. I have not done the econometric work to show how external factors affect Ugandan economy. So I'm afraid my observations are a bit general. And I would like to request the organizers in the future, if they have not done so already, to write papers that are in-depth for us to discuss. That would, of course, mean inviting speakers that are much more able than myself, so that we can get into in-depth coverage of issues. So I did a cursory look at the internet, specifically at the IMF. Could I have the next slide, please? And about global growth, it was estimated at 3.1% in 2015, and is projected at 3.4% in 2016 and 3.6% in 2017. The pickup in global activity is projected to be more gradual than was anticipated in 2015, especially in emerging markets and developing economies. So I suppose this is saying that the rate of growth worldwide has been rather sluggish and will continue to be sluggish for some time. And I suppose the implication is that we in Uganda should expect a similar sluggish growth. For us, 5%, which has been given by Mr. Makanizi, we think that is low. Just as in China, anything below 7% is considered low. But when it comes to US, 3% is considered extremely good. So I don't know how these judgments are made. For the US, 3% is excellent. For China, anything below 7% is not good enough. Next. Yes, China. 3 key transitions continue to influence the global outlook. One is China's economic slowdown. As I have already indicated, that for them below 7% is considered a slowdown. The gradual slowdown and rebalancing of economic activity in China away from investment and manufacturing toward consumption and services. That the Chinese economy is shifting from manufacturing and investment and more toward consumption and services. I suppose like other advanced economies which have become more and more service-driven economies. Commodity prices have already been mentioned by previous speakers. Lower prices for energy and other commodities. Oil prices have declined markedly since September 2015 amid continued global oil production in excess of oil consumption. Futures markets are currently suggesting only modest increases in prices in 2016 and 17. And prices of other commodities, especially metals, have also fallen. Now, Mr. Makanizi has indicated that the low prices, for the time being, oil prices, are in our favor. But later on, as we get into exporting, we hope that they will improve and move the other way. This is only a prayer. U.S. economic recovery, according to IMF, the gradual tightening in monetary policy in the United States in the context of a resilient U.S. recovery, as several other major advanced economy central banks continue to ease monetary policy. So the U.S. has increased interest rates, and this is likely to affect us. Indeed, we see already declining capital flows and currency depreciations. We're already used to that. Prospects of a gradual increase in policy interest rates in the United States, as well as bouts of financial volatility amid concerns about emerging market growth prospects, have contributed to tighter external financial conditions, declining capital flows, and further currency depreciations in many emerging market economies. This has affected us in the past, and I think will continue to affect us. Inflation, mixed inflation developments in emerging market economies reflect the conflicting implications of weak domestic demand and lower commodity prices versus marked currency depreciations over the past year. So the currency depreciations and low commodity prices have created some confusions. It's hard to predict which way things are going to move. So now that's an overview of the global trends according to IMF. Now I would like to move to the Ugandan part, the growth of Uganda's economy. 3 sectors, the services sector, the public sector, and the private sector. I want to make comments on each of these. The services sector and especially the financial sector, the tourist sector, the telecoms and transport sector, and education and health are all very important sectors that bear some commentary. I'll be very brief since some comments have already been made. Financial sector trends. Our exchange rate stabilization, I wish it were possible to predict what is likely to happen to the exchange rate. Of course, what happened last year, I hope I will not be quoted, but I think it was disastrous. The rate of volatility, I think Mr. Markans already said it, so I think I will not be killed for saying so. The rate of depreciation was extremely painful. I was in the central bank during the 80s and 90s, and we worked so hard to stabilize the Ugandan economy, which had been in a free fall up to that time. When I saw the rate of depreciation of the Uganda shilling last year, I shed tears that we are going back to economic instability. But I'm glad that there is some apparent stabilization. You can blame the dollar, you can blame other factors, but it is up to us to keep our house in order. Interest rates will remain high. Interest rates have remained outside our control. We have tried hard to bring them down for the last 30 years. They have come down. When I went to become managing director of Uganda Commercial Bank, interest rates were as high as 45% lending rates. So compared to that time, certainly, they are lower. But then inflation in those days was about 60%. But these days inflation is about 5–6%. So it's still difficult to explain why lending rates continue to be 20–30%. We have struggled, but we have not yet resolved that issue. Private credit, as a result, is a bit stagnant. It seems to go up and down, and most likely to remain stagnant because of the very high interest rates. Inflation, hopefully will stabilize, except perhaps for food prices because of uncertainties of climate change. I have a graph there of the exchange rate of Uganda shilling against the dollar from October 2015 to the present, to April 24th. Imagine if we are on a bicycle riding over that graph, or a car. It's a very rough ride. And I don't know if you draw a trend line whether you can conclude that it is relatively flat. I'm not sure, but we know, of course, that speculators profit from volatility. So I don't know if it is being driven by speculators or something else. But I hope that we can reduce the volatility and especially depreciation and the rate of depreciation. On the tourism sector, something has already been said. I think it will depend largely on domestic political stability and regional political stability, as well as global political stability. There are so many instabilities in the region and in the world it's probably not easy to predict what will happen to the tourist sector. But I did see some numbers that suggested that tourism is likely to grow. I just put them there for your interest, particularly the total contribution to GDP could grow from 2.5 billion in 2014 to 5 billion in 2025. Of course, we know that it's not difficult, not easy to see that far in the future, but I'm glad that some people are optimistic. This was, I think, from the Council on Tourism, World Council on Tourism. And the contribution of tourism to employment currently estimated at 524 and total contribution to 459,000. When you consider that government employment is probably 400,000, then you can see that's not totally insignificant. The telecoms and transport sector, which together contribute about 7% of GDP, these 2014 figures, I think the telecoms competition may have stabilized, and internet developments could continue to lower prices. Air transport, I think, is likely to grow, especially when we have a new airport. And there's talk of a new airline. I used to be chairman of Uganda Airlines for 7 years. When I left, stopped flying. Maybe if they put me back to start flying again. Cheaper rail transportation to the coast. Of course, this is still very far away until the SGR is finished. Road transportation will continue to be boosted by the determination of government to improve and complete new roads. So I think the telecoms and transport sector is likely to be a growing sector. Education and health, I want to talk about this from the point of view of prioritization. Of course, for a long time, government has prioritized education. 1997, government introduced universal primary education. And Mr. Mahakanis, you may not remember, but when I was Minister of Finance, that's when we introduced universal secondary education. Now there's pressure to introduce universal university education. Maybe now that I'm Chancellor, this will happen. The education sector, according to the education sector, according to the statistical abstract, contributes 6.7%, or contributed 6.7% of GDP in 2014-15, and health contributed 4.3% of GDP. Together, these two sectors contributed about 11%. So this is a significant portion of the services sector. The services sector are, of course, about half of the GDP. So we are like a developed country driven by services. I'm not sure how we came to manage that, but maybe we jumped some steps. The pressure to improve service delivery will force, in my opinion, government to make revolutionary changes in the way education and health services are delivered. The rate of passing, the literacy and numeracy rates are 40%. In 2014, 40% of the children tested for literacy passed, 60% failed. So this is unacceptable. And so something has to be done. Access has been accomplished. all the children have access to primary and secondary education, but the rate of performance, the rate of learning is not acceptable. So we have to do more to improve service delivery. We find, for example, that the rate of absenteeism in both primary and secondary schools is very high. Head teachers are absent 60% of the time in primary schools. So we have to do something. We have to spend more money. And what I'm suggesting here is that the issue at hand is one of prioritization. But also there is an issue of management. Let me say that when we introduced a liberal economy at the center and privatized Uganda Commercial Bank and Coffee Marketing Board and Produce Marketing Board and so many others, under pressure from IMF and World Bank, it was an uneasy process, but we accepted and did it, and we eventually came to own it and to like it. Things worked better, the economy improved. But what we seem to have done was to send the public institutions to the rural areas. So what we have now are primary schools that are government owned and operated, and health centers that are government owned and operated. And we are surprised that they don't work. And yet we know from the 30 years now that public institutions don't deliver, and that's why we sold them. So the question becomes, is there a need to take a second look at the public schools and health centers and introduce a factor of ownership? Because what we see is that no one owns the primary schools, no one owns the health centers. That's why the superintendent of a health center can lock it and go away. And if you ask why he's not there, he'll say, I'll be there when I can. There's no ownership, there's no accountability. Accountability comes from ownership. So I want to say that I think the model needs to be looked at seriously. And I'm developing a paper on this. I think that what we did 30 years ago to privatize public institutions, what we call parastatals, shipping them to the rural areas is not a solution. The faith organizations, the churches, have now largely abandoned these schools to the government. They say they are now government schools. The parents say they are government schools. And the fact of the matter is that public institutions are everybody's business and nobody's business. If a road is owned and we all run on it, when we enjoy riding on it, but when it breaks, none of us stops to repair it. It's the government to repair it. And that's what happened in the schools. Nobody owns them. And health centers, nobody owns them. And so we have to rethink. So the issue of service delivery is a very serious issue. Now the organizers are saying that I'm out of time, but they didn't. I think they told me 20 minutes in their letter. How many minutes? 0? Ah, he has given me 3 minutes. Thank you. I have already mentioned the issue of prioritization. This is a serious issue. You had Mr. Mahakani's read the minister's letter, and he listed 10 areas of interest. But we have very limited resources. And there's an issue of efficiency. If you have limited resources, it's critical to focus those resources on a few areas so that you can do them well. I'm not suggesting that some ministries should be dropped, but the prioritization is critical. And it should be a debate, a public debate, on which areas should we focus with the few resources that we have available. I'm happy to say that the President has put a focus on coffee in the private sector. And of course, in the public sector, the construction of the oil and pipeline and roads and so on are being focused on. So there is already an awareness of the need and importance of prioritization. But I think there is a need for all of us to be involved in that debate on what is the priority. So I think that the coffee will, to increase production to 20 million bags by 2020 is a very good policy. I think to bring huge benefits to the people of Uganda. I think the oil refinery and the pipeline will bring huge benefits, especially in employment as well as balance of payments. Food security has to be watched because of climate change. Construction, I have a slide. I don't know if it is there. I had a slide. I was not disturbed, but very curious to see amazing fluctuations. I don't know if you can find it. Construction volatility. Construction is a very important industry. Yeah, there it is. The blue line is showing construction as a percent of GDP from 2010-11 to 2014-15. And because of the importance of construction, I think we need to, I would like to you in the audience to note this. Why is it so volatile as a percent of GDP? The real estate activities, the red line, is growing steadily. But the construction is showing from 15% of GDP down to about 4% in the next year, and then up 2012-13, and then down. This volatility, I think, bothers me. Of course, I would like to see more money put in the construction sector. I think it's a great thing. But I hope that maybe the statistics are wrong, I don't know. But it's something I want to bring to your attention, because construction is a highly important sector, not only because it provides shelter, but provides a huge amount of employment. So I have to conclude that Uganda's present and future growth is fully and vitally intertwined in the global and regional economic and political environment. Definitely we are exposed to regional and global political instability. We will be affected by it, and we have to be secure ourselves. And I think we have done reasonably well in the past. But the economic sources of most of our investments, especially infrastructure investments, but also the oil and pipeline, are coming from outside. And so what happens outside will certainly affect the future of Uganda. But we are a small economy, and we can't help but be affected by the outside world. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Dr. Ezra Suruma. A round of applause. Okay, I think we're going to open it up right now to our panelists. We have Mr. Andrew Mwenda, who's going to speak to us in between 5 and 10 minutes, followed by Dr. Fred Muhomuza to give us your responses to all the presentations we've had. Mr. Andrew Mwenda, you're welcome.
Oh, Jesus Christ. Oh. Bring an old man without fixing things. Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. I want to thank also Acode for inviting an old man of 103 years like me to speak to very important guests like you. All the previous presenters, members of parliament, all protocol observed. My job as a discussant is really to give my views of what these other people have presented. Let me frame my discussion of what has been presented this way. The challenge that faces this country is how to sustain economic growth over a very long period of time. You can argue all sorts of physics, mechanics, and economics. I can tell you, a country grows from poverty to riches simply by sustaining growth over a very long period of time. And I'll give an example. The United States right now has a per capita income of about $54,000. It's the 10th highest per capita income in the world. Of course, there are countries like Qatar, Luxembourg, Norway, Singapore, which are higher than the United States. It's the 10th. But that is because the United States has sustained a rate of per capita income growth at 1.5% per year over the last 150 years. Please note that statistic. Therefore, the challenge our country faces, and towards the end I'll come to the issue of why growth is important and why, when we, African elites and all elites from poor countries, combined with Western elites and elites from all other countries, we discuss fiction. I'll come to this fiction later. If you look at the history of economic development, you realize, A, that in fact there is a tendency of rich countries to grow richer, poor countries to go poorer. Any one of you can go and investigate, you will find that there is increasing divergence between the incomes of the rich and the incomes of the poor. Now, there are very few countries. They cannot even exceed more than 20. But serious countries of the Ugandan type, I think I can only... Because you see, Hong Kong, Singapore, these are city-states. So you can talk of Taiwan, South Korea, maybe Malaysia. There are very few countries that have actually tended to converge in income with rich countries. Most poor countries have diverged. Now, of course, China is converging. If you look at a study by Michael Spence, he's a Nobel laureate in economics. He studied economies of the world from 1950 to 2005. He found only 13 countries in the entire world have sustained a rate of economic growth of 7% plus consistently over a period of 25 years. 13. From 1950 to 2005 have sustained a per capita, rather a rate of income of GDP growth of 7% and above. Why is 7% important? Because there is something statisticians and economists call the rule of 72. This rule, by the way, if you do it statistically, you'll prove it's proven right. It says that if anything under measurement grows at a rate of 1% per year, it will double every 72 years. If anything under measurement grows at a rate of 7% per year, it will double every 10 years. So if you want to become rich, you ensure that two things. One, you must run a marathon of growth, not a sprint. Two, it must be above 7% so that you can double per capita income every 10 years. So let us Put Uganda on a microscope. How is it performing in GDP growth relative to other countries of the world? Over the last 25 years, this country, which has been grossly mismanaged by Keith Mhakanis and his team at Ministry of Finance, has had the 11th fastest growing economy in the world. You can go to the IMF website, download 189 countries, they are there in the data. Do your, my friend Gobi is there, you do your statistics, it will come Uganda is 11th. Between 2013, you go backwards to 1989. It is the 11th fastest growing economy in the world, which should give us confidence that, and the rate of growth is roughly 6.65. Mhakanis, of course, has written wrong statistics. We use the same data. Whoever wrote his speech wrote the wrong thing. He said it's 17th. It is actually 11th. He said it is 6.5. It is 6.65. Now, therefore, here is the question for Uganda. Why is it that in spite of an impressive rate of growth in the last 25 years, Uganda has performed better than South Korea, Taiwan, Singapore? Singapore is number 12, so one place behind Uganda. Botswana, Mauritius. Why is Uganda so, why are we so angry that we are so poor in spite of an impressive rate of growth? One, of course, reason is that the period may be too short, 25 years. But what I think is most important is to look at per capita income. Although Uganda has sustained an impressive rate of GDP growth rate, it has been significantly undercut by the fact that you Ugandans, I think you enjoy having a lot of sex and too many babies. I'm serious. So population growth rate is 3.3%. So it cuts down your per capita income growth down to 2%. Assuming we had zero population growth rate, our per capita income right now would be close to $8,000. If we had 1% growth rate in our population, still our per capita income would be in a middle income country of about $5,000 at purchasing power parity. So, should we control population? I think not. Because I can tell you as a student of history, I'm the oldest person in this room at 103 years. All of you are young enough to be my great-grandchildren. I can tell you that if you read history from ancient Rome to ancient Egypt and ancient Greece, you realize that the fertile inherit the earth. Does not matter how civilized you may be. The original Romans were Sabines, Umbrians, and Latins. By the time of the collapse of the Roman Empire in 486, the barbarians were the most populous people in Rome. So if you Ugandans want to inherit the earth, please produce many children. Does not matter their quality. The second thing I want to come to is, therefore, what is the second problem? So one is per capita income growth, which is the measure of individual wealth, has been undercut by high rates of population growth. The second, you can look at the figures, is Uganda's growth has largely been driven by services. Services tend to create a small concentration of jobs of a higher skill and higher education. If you want to read the countries that have rapidly transformed, which are not sister states, Taiwan, South Korea, England, the United States, Germany, wherever it is, they have done so through industrialization, which is driven by manufacturing. Manufacturing is the one sector that tends to create large-scale, broad-based, low-skill, blue-collar jobs. So if your industry in Uganda is just 18% of your GDP, and I think manufacturing in industry could be something like 8%, you can clearly see that it is difficult to structurally transform this society from an agricultural-based economy to an industrial-based economy, from an economy where the vast majority of citizens live in rural areas and depend on industry for a livelihood. It is right now, I think 70% of Ugandans depend on agriculture for a livelihood. 64% depend on subsistence agriculture, hand to mouth. So economic growth has not produced the transformative dividend, partly because we have not invested in manufacturing. It is driven by services. I'll give you another statistic. As I speak in front of you here right now, one country in South Asia called Vietnam has more manufacturing jobs than the rest of sub-Saharan Africa combined. If you look at the rates of growth between Vietnam and Uganda, they are almost the same. But if you look at the rate at which each of these countries has reduced poverty or moved many people out of poverty into better incomes, you find that Vietnam beats Uganda hands down. Why? Because its growth is driven by that sector that tends to employ a large number of people. One of the problems, of course, is with the Keith Mhakanisis. The policies I have always supported, you know, my positions have been changing as I grow older and reflect more. I think the policy of liberalization and privatization was a very good policy when we are coming out of the ditch of civil war, of armed conflict. But I think that while a free market economy will give you short-term allocative efficiency, it does not do the things that that provide impetus to transformative change. It does not address the problems of development over the long term, rather over the short and medium term. So how do you drive manufacturing? Let me tell you people here, to drive manufacturing in any society requires an activist state to intervene in the economy by allying itself, at least not to popular classes, by the way, to capitalists, entrepreneurs, to drive manufacturing. In every society I have studied, even Nobel laureates in history and economics would find it difficult to defeat me on this. I can tell you such strategic interventions will involve a combination of four things. There must be tax breaks or tax holidays given to investors. There must be access to long-term affordable credit, largely organized by the state. 3, there must be tariff protection in order to shield your young industries from international competition. 4, there must be subsidies from the state. And let me tell you, there is not a single government in the world that will place resources in the hands of those who are going to use them against it. So, should you allow government intervention, you must immediately welcome corruption, brigandage, thuggery, because the people in the government will have to give it to those they like. I can tell you, Museveni will not give money to SJ to set up factories. It will go to Salim Saleh. Are we politically willing to accept it? That is the price of an activist state. Whether it is South Korea, Daewoo, Samsung, Hyundai, LG, please go read it. These were friends of Park Chung-hee and his military apparatchik in South Korea. Whether it is Germany or the United States, but even Obama recently, I know of a company he gave $450 million from tap money and it filed for bankruptcy 2 weeks. But it was run by people of his campaign managers. You see, so politicians are human beings. They will tend to allocate resources to those they favor, not necessarily on merit. Question, fellow Ugandans, are you willing to pay that price? If you are not willing, accept a free market economy and it will deliver you this kind of growth that keeps you a peasant society. The final one, I want to come to the second line of fiction. I'm sure my time is running out. We come to... Okay, they say my time is out. Can I be given 1 minute for an old man is about 500 minutes? Let me conclude by saying this. We have talked about service delivery here, education and health. Let me tell you, the problem of poor quality education, poor health services in Uganda, poor roads, has very, very little to do with corruption in our society. That's what you all think. So I'm giving you statistics because I've been doing this. First, the governance model we have is of a developed country, not a poor country. If you look at the budget of the United States, today, 2016, both local government, state government, and federal government, it is about $6.8 trillion this year. Divided by 322 million people, it is $20,900 per capita spending. Expenditure per person by the US is $20,900. Do you hear that? Expenditure per person in Uganda this financial year is $150. Ladies and gentlemen, please, with $150, what do you expect to do? So, if you want to know how you manage a society at $150 per capita spending by the public sector, you must ask yourself, how was the United States managed when it was spending $150 per person per year? That year is 1860. I have done all these calculations, even adjusted these figures to inflation. US population was 31 million, expenditure 178 million. If you get 178 million of 1860, it translates to 4.9 billion today. Divided by 31 million people in America, it comes to $159 per person. At that time, go online, look at the US budget. The US government did not, whether local government, federal government, or state government, did not fund education, did not fund health, pensions, healthcare. Largely it's spent on defense, infrastructure, and law and order. But yes, please, fact. I have looked at the budget of France, Belgium, the United Kingdom, and the United States. All of them, The idea that the government should provide health care, education, pensions, and all these welfare benefits is a late 20th, rather 19th century product. It's around 1890. Begins taking shape after the First World War, but gains full expression after the Second World War. The NHS, National Health Care England, is created in 1946 when these countries are highly industrialized and the resources available in the hands of the state are enough to afford it. This little poor country of yours cannot afford the programs it has given itself to give education and health to everybody. When you rapidly expand services so rapidly with very little money, it means that the state in Uganda is underdeveloped in financial and human skills capacity. It is overdeveloped in function, but it is underdeveloped in capacity, human and financial. So its reach is beyond its grasp. Because the reach of the state is beyond the grasp of the state, it means ability to supervise is so low, and the consequence is incompetence, absenteeism, corruption, and the things you see. This is an inevitable consequence of trying to manage a poor society as a rich society. Thank you very much for listening to an old man.
Thank you very much indeed, Evangelist Andrew Mwenda. Speaking with so much passion. Should become an evangelist for something. Let me invite our second panelist, Dr. Fred Muhumza, to speak to us for between 5 and 10 minutes.
The beauty with coming last is I can also discuss Andrew Mwenda's presentation, much as he's a panelist. I agree with him on overstretching. When government decided to focus on infrastructure, we needed to pull out some certain things. We did not. And so we have overstretched, and we are definitely not performing as we should. But I think he plays around badly with some numbers as well. Impressive growth. Whom are you impressing? I think Dr. Suruma was spot on. Americans will be impressed by 3%. China is not impressed by 7%. Should Uganda be impressed by 6.6, or should we not? I think we shouldn't. The reality tells us that is not impressive growth. Maybe we should have been impressed by 10. So we seem to have set the target too low and are using the words, I think, wrongly. 11th growth rate in the world. When a squirrel doubles its weight, it's okay. That will be 100% or 200% growth. When an elephant shrinks, so you don't just compare and line up countries and then begin to compare percentages of growth. That doesn't help us to carry the discussion forward. But he raises an important point. Growth is a fundamental thing to have. And I think that is where we should be concerned as Ugandans. Before I came here, I met one of the big people in town who has been attracting investors in Uganda and told me, why aren't you positive about things when you meet investors? I said, I'm a professional. If an investor said, should I come to Uganda and invest, or I've come here to invest, give me an outlook. I cannot hide the reality of the numbers. It is very clear our economy grew at 10%, at 8%. Those averages are coming down. Keith has kindly given us the reality, which we've always known, that our growth rate for this year was revised from 5.8 to 5. So how do I tell an investor that we are outward looking? This is an outlook. So some of these realities, I'm glad we have the numbers, but we only need to face these numbers positively if we are to change them. And we're not going to change them by making statements. I hope I will make a few statements that can speak to how we can change these numbers. The trouble you have with old men like Andrew Mwenda, they always tell you that old is wisdom. So they refer to their 100 years of existence like tortoises. As you are getting closer, they shift the goalpost. We had Vision 2025. Now they have put us to 2040. Some people will be working on 2065. Old men want to always refer to America's existence of 100 and 200 years ago. But we need to walk our path now. Where should I put my next step? Can we come home and see how Uganda should get there? How can we bring back our growth? And I want to take 5 minutes to just say a few things. One is, how do you get growth? Economics is very basic. Growth comes out of people investing, people employing factors of production, looking to serve an existing demand. Where is that demand? You either have it domestically or you have it outside, which is export-led growth. The German economy is 50% exports. And it's mainly within their region, in the European Union. So they are the strongest economy in Europe. And don't tell the Germans about disbanding the European Union, because that will disband their own economy. They will fight to defend it. Where are Uganda's sources of exports? I crunched the numbers last week. They are available. When we talk about exports for Uganda and where we should be focusing, there are basically 3 areas. COMESA. And when you talk about COMESA, it is just 4 countries. The others are insignificant in those numbers. Kenya, DRC, Rwanda, and South Sudan. South Sudan, surprisingly, is still featuring prominently in the numbers in 2014 and 2015. It's still a market. Reason, what are we selling to South Sudan? It's basically food. Now, that begins to speak to what should be our growth strategy. You need to go back and revisit your agriculture. And I will speak to that. I don't want people who want more money for agriculture to go raiding Keith. I still believe the problem with agriculture is not necessarily money. So don't go raiding and saying, give them 4% or 6% or 20% of the budget. No, that would not fix it. Because even the little we are putting there, we have issues. At least I do, if you don't share that with me. So conventional economics, to begin with, has failed. Globally, when the financial crisis hit us 8 years ago, 2008, everybody knew we would resolve it. And the IMF was at the forefront. Everybody used the conventional economics interest rates. Lower them, pump money into the economy, the printing of money. And the Americans did a very good job at this. At one point, they were putting $86 billion per month in the American economy. Now, if you don't know what $86 billion means, Uganda's economy is $27 billion. So multiply it by 3, that's what Americans were putting in per month. For a long time, the economy hasn't picked up. So conventional economics doesn't answer some questions. And I will point shortly to one of the issues that needs to come in. So if problems are structural, you cannot apply monetary solutions. By and large, Uganda's growth is structurally constrained. And we need to get back to the structural issues. And those go back right to the docket of Minister of Finance. I'm very happy with you about the way you manage the electrons crisis. We need to do more of this. We need to target our resources to smaller areas. Let's annoy people. Let's annoy people. It's no longer the science of making everybody happy by giving them a quarter of an egg. An egg. This is not church service where we receive very little for Holy Communion and we say thank you, God. You've got to find something all the way. But that means other people must get out of the equation. So your priority list needs to go from 7 to literally maybe 3 or even 2. And security is coming back. I was just discussing and looking through the budget when you look at government priorities. Security at one point was number 6, 7. Now it is number 1. And it is fundamental. As I've said, if an egg's shell cracks, that egg, no matter how much you incubate it, it can never hatch. Security is that shell. If you go back and revisit our NDP 1, we use that illustration. So macroeconomics, physical security must take priority. And when it comes back, it means something else must leave. Because we cannot compromise on security. And that has come back. So something has got to give way. You've got to be tough and let people go off the issue. So fiscal policy for me is even more important and it's got to be more strategic if we are to get growth back. Let's bring agriculture back into the picture. And not in terms of budget. The budget will follow. But we have business to do before we bring agriculture back into the picture. I've said in the COMESA region, agriculture is all that we're exporting to most of these people. And it's a big source for export-led growth. It will bring in all we need. And with the 2 seasons a year, we will be there within a year, not within so many years of industrialization. Industrialization will follow us later. So do maize, do beans, do rice. These are the things our neighbors are eating and we're also eating them. Go out to Europe. This is our other market for export. Europe, you are not talking about the entire Europe. There are basically 3 countries according to the statistics. And the statistics, the numbers don't lie. You're talking about the Netherlands, Belgium, and the UK. And then there is a category they call others. That is the number 4. But individually, you're talking about the Netherlands, Belgium, and the UK, in that order. The others, I believe it is about fish. There is sometimes this confusion of philanthropy, and I don't know what other people do. Fish farming in Uganda, in ponds. Uganda is so full of water, you don't need fish farming in ponds. Just generate and multiply fish fry and distribute it in all the lakes and rivers. We have so many. All that we are lacking there is fish fry. Just generate these things, and within 9 months, your fish export market will be back. Already the capacity to process is in this country, sitting idle. So don't tell me about investors. They are already here and they are disappointed there is no fish to process. So when you talk about value addition without anything to add value to, we need to get back. These are the issues we need to revisit in agriculture. Before we talk about the budget, must be very strategic and very specific. Don't give people money to buy new cars and migrate from Entebbe to come and live in Kampala for their offices. That is wrong priority setting. So I think we need to get into agriculture and do a few things. One is institutional reform. Restructure that the way agriculture is structured. Let's get back to the production centers. Let's give them the money directly, including private sector who are directly involved. And this is why I will differ with Andrew Mwenda. It's okay to actually give money to private individuals, but don't just give it to them because they are your friends. Because remember, at the end of the day, you have to account the population, which will become jittery if they do not have any money. So give a friend who will also help you to resolve the problem next. So if your friend is a politician and is your brother or is your cousin or your relative but does not know anything of production, give him another responsibility. Direct the money where it will resolve some issues. So when we get into agriculture, we need to do seed multiplication or input multiplication. I get annoyed when government releases money to buy inputs that are not there. We did it with Dr. Surum a few years ago. We gave 3 billion to buy rice, and when I walked around, the rice had not been bought because it was not there. So we worked an arrangement with prisons to use them to do seed multiplication. Because they have the skill, they have the land, they have everything. It's an easy pickup. So for me, it is okay to bring the army into production of agriculture, but not the soldiers. I make a difference between the two. Don't bring in soldiers, because that will begin with bringing in my friend Salim Saleh. Bring in the army, because you'll be bringing in the production department of the army. And Saleh can be part of that. But the moment you pick out soldiers, you are missing the point. So let's get strategic, then we'll create some growth moving. So what am I saying as I conclude? Revisit your growth strategy. Specifically, agriculture needs to come into the picture. We shall industrialize, but that is later. You still have 70% of your population locked up in agriculture. They are not about to come out. But it's not a bad thing anyway. And that's the other reform we need to bring to agriculture. In the mind of the politician of looking at agriculture as a backward thing. It's not. It's actually what is going to propel even your industrialization. Your value adding, your value processing. Agriculture is the key, and we can leverage it to the next step. Any country that used the industrialization model of manufacturing is right now in serious trouble. As I've said, conventional economics has changed. We are not going to get growth of the world coming from industrialization anymore. Forget that. Because growth has distributed itself massively. Who is producing in Vietnam? Certainly not Vietnamese. The Chinese have shifted there for cheap labor. Production is taking place and industrialization is taking place in very many areas. And so that is not going to be an answer. But it is also part of the problem that with a lot of technological advancements, you no longer have the old industries of locomotives as we knew them. So new growth centers have emerged, and to compete with those takes education, not the one that we have in Uganda today. Land reform is going to be critical for agriculture. I don't know how we tamper with that. It is a big animal, but if we don't resolve that, it's a major hindrance to the development of this country, both for agriculture and for infrastructure development. I am not even sure we are going to do the pipeline with the Tanzanians. They will do their side. But I know now Ugandans who are waiting to know where is it going to pass. I go and buy that piece and wait for compensation. So all your money you're putting aside for building the pipeline will end up in compensation and will become a non-profitable venture. So land reform is an issue because land is a big factor for production. But is Uganda ready to resolve that? That is my challenge. And I think as I close our growth strategy, as I've said, infrastructure is certainly vital. Certainly vital. But you know that used to be senior 6 A-level economics, where you will be told infrastructure will cause growth. As we grow deeper into economics, we realize growth comes out of a multivariate function. It's more than one factor. The other day I was discussing with friends of mine in the energy sector, and I said, surely energy should drive growth. I said, that is true, but every time I'm traveling and I see power lines without any dropping, how are you going to collect the money to pay back? Because it's not about generation and distribution. It's about those lines dropping to serve people who consume and eventually pay. So if I don't see those lines going down to power factories, then who is going to pay for this energy? We are going to end up with high tariff on the few who are using it, and then we'll lose the very essence of competitiveness. And the Ethiopians will edge us out of this equation, and any other who is part of this. So we need a bigger strategy to understand our investment, because infrastructure is a facilitator. I think everybody needs to go back to page 411 of the original NDP 1 and look at the egg analogy on how we had structured the economic growth. What are the growth centers and what are the facilitators of growth? To have investments in energy without the industries, you have dead stock and you are in serious, serious trouble. Because most of these loans are 10, 15, 20 years, and some of them are even less. If you do not have money being generated by those factories, you'll have people knocking on your debt, and debt is back with us, and we'll have a problem. So growth is going to take us seriously thinking about our strategy again. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Dr. Fred Muhumuza. He's renowned for making it really, really easy to understand some of these complex phenomena. We'll now open it to the plenary. We have just about half an hour or more to do the plenary session and the responses, and then to wrap it all up. This is how we'll do it. You raise your hand, a microphone will be passed to you. Make your contribution or ask your question. You can ask it specifically. You can also ask it generically, and it will be answered by whoever it is directed to. Can I have a microphone closer to the front? On this side, there's Honorable Stephen Mukitale Birahwa. We'll have one microphone on that side and one microphone here. Can we have the first microphone coming to Honorable Birahwa, former chair of the Committee on the National Economy in Uganda's parliament. We'll take 30 seconds, between 30 seconds and a minute, to give this response, to give our questions, and we'll have just about 10 minutes to do that. Ask those questions.
Thanks so much, the conveners and all stakeholders, protocol observed. At a population growth rate of 3.4, we need at least 12% GDP growth to transform. So that tells you the uphill task we have. I thank the Ministry of Finance and Bank of Uganda for taming the inflation and bring sanity on the exchange rate. As opposed to 2011, 2012. But what has not come out in this debate, it has also come at a cost of domestic borrowing. The private sector has paid a price. They have been squeezed, and yet these are the one drivers of growth we need. They are the taxpayers, the employers. I would want to recommend that we only use the instruments for inflation targeting and not for mobilizing revenue, because you are competing against yourself. We are talking about global economic outlook. Think about the Koreans, the Japanese, the South Africans, who closed their economies because of the challenge of the current account. When your import toll is too high and your exports are too low, the economy is then used to do what they call inward-looking policies. And you don't do business as usual. So what is Uganda import substituting to reduce that? Even when we get remittances, we are not doing a drive to increase on those diaspora skills. We have an argument whether Uganda can export nurses or not. And that's unfortunate. So we really need to have a drive in those areas. Now, export promotion in the global market, even with AGOA, it comes with standards. Even with EBA, it comes with standards. We may have to enable our private sector with long-term financing. But also some have money. This Kwagalana group, we may help them to stop doing these shopping malls and possibly put them in value chain, and then we get something to export beyond what we export in Juba. And that's the challenge. We must have standards to take in those markets. Now, a point has been made. For us to be able to move, we need beyond UP and USE, we need to vocationalize with entrepreneurship, even the secondary education. But we need skilling beyond just university. I am opposed to rushing for universities, because for every engineer, you need at least 25 technicians. So we should go back and do more vocationalization, more entrepreneurship, and then we can think of going to the stage of universities. Now, buy Uganda, promote Uganda. I want to agree, tourism is an area to go. I have talked of the exporting diaspora. Ethiopia is benefiting from that. But the area of minerals, oil and gas, is not being brought. We are putting money in infrastructure, and we must do so. But I think where we are going to get quick returns is tourism, agriculture value addition, minerals, and oil and gas. I don't see these areas getting enough funding as we should do. The other unfortunate part here, we are talking more about the expenditure. We don't seem to be talking about the revenue side, how to broaden the taxes. And this is another very important debate which I think we need to look into, so that as a country, the private sector led is the most. Finally, Dr. Surma has raised a point. When we liberalized, when we privatized, we missed a point. One of the intentions was the state to concentrate on its core functions, where it does best, and divest others. But how did we end up again? And I agree with Andrew here, government taking a bigger toll in social services. We took away the role of PTA and the role of foundation bodies. So we need to bring back the foundation bodies to be in charge of education, and if possible, do some PTA contributions, and then government can give funding in terms of a bursary, but government doesn't have to manage schools. Our local governments, our sub-counties and districts, local governments do not have the capacity. It's not their core function. And therefore, we need also to review the role of the state in doing this. And the monies we have, we've just been in the budget committee, the monies we have scattered in NADs and youth programs could be enough money to put back an agriculture bank in this country. Just putting resources together, we could have these resources put together. I thank you so much.
Thank you very much indeed. We'll take Mr. Everest Kayondo. I would like to recognize Honorable Rosette Mutambi, a new member of parliament from Bara district. Would you like to? Yes, Rosette, Madam Honorable Mutambi is here. Welcome. Let's hear from Mr. Everest Kayondo, Chairman of Kasita.
Thank you very much. Kayondo Everest, my name. Incidentally, I will make also just a big, just general comment. And we have one of the factors of growth or production is actually labor. And this is where we are. One pointed out that we are doing a lot of production and manufacturing a lot of children. But we have a very big challenge, and I will relate it with education and agriculture. Because of this big number which we have, how is our budget helping to cater for this this very big number? I just remember the statistics of last year, that the children who did P7 last year, we got a number of 680,000 who sat P7. But they were recruited at 1.95 million, meaning that 68% never reached P7. Only 32% did to P7. So with that high school dropout, yet we are enjoying UPE. What are we planning, and how can our budget help to absorb these half-literate or illiterate part of our population, And I think the best way would be in agriculture, where they can be absorbed, because their hope of migrating to town, yes, has been has hit a very big snag, where they are doing mainly border and sports betting. These are the main jobs which you are providing. And once you interpret these two major jobs which are absorbing our youth, what are they? What implication do they have for the growth of the economy? The answer is the way the economists and Mr. Muhakanizi can handle. But most importantly, maybe finally, I'm looking at tourism and the promotion of tourism, which we think, as we might not compete very favorably with our brothers in the in the European countries in manufacturing, I think tourism would be an area which we could easily promote. Some of us have cried that promoting tourism without a national flag carrier can be a very big challenge. And sincerely, when all our brothers like Rwanda, Kenya, these have national flag carriers. And we now have an East African visa. And that single visa, incidentally, these people will end up just entering from these other countries. And sincerely, we shall have a very big challenge of attracting tourists. I submit. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Professor Augustus Nwagaba is at the back of the room, and then we'll hear from Honorable Miriam Matembe and then move to this wing. Professor Nwagaba.
Thank you very much, moderator. And thank you very much, Dr. Surumand, my friend Mwakanizi, and the all protocol observed. I think the point that I did not hear from these eminent sons of Uganda is what I can summarize, and I will just summarize it in one sentence. The political economy of transformation has not come out very clearly, and I will just elaborate it with one example. The reason why most African countries have not transformed their economies is that if you look at the political history of economic transformation, the bottom line, irrespective of whether these countries are very highly democratic through Westminster democracy, which you all know that we are trying to achieve, whether they are predatory regimes, whether they are gentle authoritarian regimes, whether they are really open dictatorship regimes, the bottom line has actually been what we call transformative leadership. The leaders, the political class, and also the political leadership of all these countries have actually been in the interest of the people they are leading. I will give you one example of South Korea, which Andrew Mwenda has pointed out. General Park in South Korea between 1954 to 1974, when he was assassinated, managed to do two things in South Korea. One was he attracted sufficient money from US, of course, to fight North Korea, as you all know, the political economy of that place. But this money was used very well, Dr. Suruma, because Dr. Suruma said that the reason why health centers and our schools, primary schools, my primary school where I graduated, and I'm a professor now in the university, cannot even have one child who has first grade. It cannot. Does it mean every child now has become dense? When it produced all of us, it even produced the central bank of Uganda now, the governor of the central bank. The school cannot produce one child with. What used to happen? Do you need to own this school in order to have a headmaster teaching in that class? You don't, Dr. Suruma. What has collapsed is the benevolence that you need, the leadership that you need to make sure this teacher is teaching. You don't need to own it. What is really, what we are lacking is that implementation part. Our countries are suffering from what we have as big heads with very lean shoulders and very stunted legs. That's what these countries are suffering from. You have countries whose leadership you wonder whether they are really interested in that particular country. General Park did two things, Andrew Mwenda, you know very well. He attracted this money from US. This money transformed South Korea. South Korea is one of the largest donors here now. And we were with South Korea all begging in 1954, 1960, up to 1970, when he was assassinated. What did he do? He made sure that all public services, all public institutions are operating. And he would shoot you dead if you don't do so. He would shoot you dead if you steal government money. You do not need to own that institution. And actually the transformation of South Korea was not done by the private sector as such, but was driven by government in the driving seat. That was the difference. It was driven actually by the national planning of South Korea. I don't know whether anybody from NPA is here. This Uganda's NPA.
All right.
If he's here. It was driven by making sure that the public sector is in the driving seat of that transformation. And you do not need to own. You don't need to own a school. You don't need to own a public institution. Then finally, there is an issue which Dr. Srumas, I think, brought out, and this is an issue of financing that transformation. Number one, I've said you need a transformative leadership, whether it is democracy that you know, whether it is benevolence and so on. You need a leader that is interested in that transformation process, as interested in his people, and he's thinking, if you want, on behalf of those people. You even don't need very high, large parliaments, and these parliaments were not there. In those, they were not there. The wealth, actually the wealth, Mr. Moderator, which Portugal, you know very well Portugal. Portugal was the first country in Europe to explore outside, to bring wealth from outside. But do you know that most of this wealth in Portugal ended up in the UK? Why? Because of again of the lapse in leadership. So it also did not mean that the external environment, if it's also well endowed, will actually now make influence into this domestic environment. It will also, it will not. You also now need the leadership that Britain, which came in 1520, later with Vasco da Gama in 1497, as you know very well. The wealth eventually ended up at the UK, which came much later in terms of foreign exploration.
Thank you very much indeed,
So
Professor.
in conclusion, therefore, what am I saying is that Dr. Suruma, we need transformative leadership. You need public sector management, which cannot come out of the driving seat and pretend that is in the know and also in the implementation of things when you are not interested. You need, irrespective, let me repeat this without sounding very naive, irrespective of the level of democracy at which you're operating, but we need transformative environment in terms of leadership which can drive things. And in terms of financing, Dr. Suruma, I have been also looking at the political economy of the last 600 years. And I have not come across, just listen to this, I have not come across any country in the 189 countries that you have on this mother earth, which has ever transformed its economy from one inch to another without having indigenous financing. And for you are thinking that Stanbic Bank, Standard Chartered Bank, Barclays Bank, the 3 banks out of the 25 commercial banks which control 79% of financial assets are here to transform your financial sector, and you'll get credit and do business. Are they your uncles? Are they your uncles?
All right.
So the financial assets we have in the country here, economic agency relative to GDP,
thank you,
is controlled by foreign financing. Do you know what happens to the interest rates? And also that issue has not come out in this August House.
Okay.
The reason why interest rates are high is, I agree, is the very high financial fiscal deficit, which is high. Government borrows a lot, and so it crowds out private sector. So you compete with them, and people prefer to, of course, buy treasury bills. That's not the end of the story, Dr. Suruma. The end of the story is these banks. Do you know these 3 banks? If I was a chairman, Stanbic Holdings, Chairman Barclays, Chairman, the third one is what? Standard Chartered. Do you know they can sit on a mandate then and make a curtail? Just like petrol stations work, just did work before we had the Total and the share, and say interest rates must be at 27. If the governor has brought the CBR from 17, the other day it was actually from 17, even if we brought back to 11, how come that the interest rates are not following this curve now?
All
if
right.
we run the curve on CBR, it will not. And in Kenya, it does. In Kenya, it does. Just do research, it does. Why can commercial banks respond
All right.
to the central bank in Kenya, whereas for us, they have their KCB, which is in South Sudan.
All right.
They have a contribution of the financial,
Okay.
financial sector.
Very strong points made.
Which can
Very,
ensure to
very
bring
strong
interest
point.
rates down, and people can own their
All right.
economy and
Okay.
do business within the
Okay.
domestic finance.
Thank you very much
If
indeed.
you continue thinking that these people are going to come, Mr.
Yes,
Chairman,
very strong points there.
and your aunties, and
Okay.
so you go there and they, hey, my, bring
All right.
interest rates down.
Thank you very much.
Bring it.
Okay, thank you, Professor Augustus Noga. Thank you very much indeed. Our next, let's hear from Honorable Miriam Matembe. And then after that, we'll take 3 questions from this side. The lady, and we'll take those 2 questions and then get the responses from our panel.
Now, I really didn't think that I would say anything after he has talked, after an economist has talked on that side, because me, I was going to talk about it in my ordinary language. Now he has put it right in the right language. Therefore, I endorse all that you was saying, because I think he's the first one to speak the way I had wanted us to speak, to bring all those external issues to Uganda here, and look at what we are doing as a country. I listened to all those people, you know, the nearest they could speak about the issue of governance, which they kept hiding. Mohakan said inefficiency in management, you know, he talked it like that. And then Dr. Suruma said, well, with all these external things, it is up to us to keep our house in order. They talked it like that. But they were saying, look here, bad governance and politics of patronage and retention of power, all these things should be looked into. Because if the external factors are against us, what do we do internally to catch or to cope with what is happening out there? Because for me, like I'm a wife in the home and a manager in my home there. When the prices in the market and all these things are going wild, what do I do here at home? How do I spend the little that I have? How do I prioritize my affairs in the home to be able to live while I try to catch up with what is happening there? You were so silent and just hid it like that.
Yes.
But I'm glad Professor brought it up very clearly, and I wanted to say that what is the role of bad governance and politics of patronage? Don't chat me when I'm just... I'm about to keep quiet actually, but when I see you do like this, you interfere with my flow of my mind, because my mind flows very nicely. So we must look at the role of bad governance and politics of patronage in this country. Because as he was saying, he's gone. To go and manage, to hand on from the presidency, to manage everything. Why did they chase us as parents out of the schools when we were managing them? Because when we manage them and we are in charge, then they are not in charge to patronize everybody, so that everybody is patronized and do not do their roles. And when you do like that, then you become totally inefficient, then you are indisciplined, then you are mismanaging the whole economy. Therefore, as he said, until we get human-centered and service-oriented type of leadership, which goes into leadership to focus on what they can do for the people by way of serving them efficiently, we shall be here crying, and we are not going to reach there. And therefore, I conclude by saying, I wanted to listen to you to hear what you are talking about, all this boosted, do they call it boosted, expanded public expenditure. All these now parliamentarians who have become so many, all these local government, all these politics of, they are now going, every failure, every member of parliament who failed will either be assistant RDC, assistant nonsense. All this nonsense, is it going to stop What is going to happen? Because that's what we want to look into. What is going to happen when they are appointing ministers? Now that the youth are demanding their own minister, and to retain the power, you must please the youth and use them instead of promoting them and skilling them. Just use them for the sake of manipulation and exploitation. We must look at these issues, don't avoid them. We must look at them squarely if we are to move any better.
Honorable Matembe, thank you very much indeed. We'll take those two questions, the ladies on that side. Kindly introduce yourself for those who might not know you. And then she'll follow you.
Thank you very much. And I do respect
your good name, madam?
All the participants around and my colleague, Keith Muhakanizi. My name is Florence Kutesa. Keith used to be my colleague about 14 years ago. I'd like to thank Acode and the Ministry of Finance for this dialogue. But I would like to raise one area of concern which keeps on coming up in all these dialogues but not addressed. My area of concern is the lack of political accountability, the lack of strong political institutions. I'm building on what the others are talking about. Why am I saying this? What is the role of cabinet in what we are discussing here? What is the role of parliament? These are our political institutions. My particular concern, as I've already mentioned, I used to work in government. I served government for 21 years and I left. And I joined IMF, providing technical assistance in such areas. In all countries in Africa where I worked, we have these dialogues. But nothing is followed up. These dialogues, I was part of this when I was a director budget. We used to come and attend these dialogues, the same issues being raised. Why? Where is accountability? We used to make poverty reduction action plans, National Development Plan 1, 2 now. Why? There is no accountability. No one takes anyone to account for the NDP results. No one takes Keith Muhakanizi or the Minister for Education to account for what they wanted to do. So whom should we address and whom should we attack? And who should be held responsible? And who should be strengthened to ensure that what we have identified as areas for discussion here can be taken up and discussed? Can we have cabinet and parliament discuss such issues like we used to have the PEC in the past?
Presidential Economic Commission?
Yes, and agree cabinet decisions and account within a medium-term framework. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We'll take the lady next to you across the aisle, and then we'll get the responses, starting with Mr. Muhakanizi.
Thank you very much. My name is Lillian Tamale. I'm a research fellow from Acode. I also work on the Local Government Council Scorecard Initiative. I don't think we can afford to have such a debate without going local or without talking about the subject of local governments. And I just wanted to pose a question to Keith, and I think also the old man would have a view about the issue of local government financing. I know that there's a tendency for us to hear about the argument that when you talk about financing for government, you're basically talking about local government financing. I agree. However, for some of us who relate so closely with local governments, there's a general feeling among the local government leaders that they feel like they are so local, probably because of their name. They feel like they are so distant, and there's a question about the percentage. I think we are currently standing at 16% of our budget. There was a time, I think 3 years ago, we were talking of 17. We came down to 15. And among the local government fraternity, there's all this argument of this should probably be much higher. There are proposals of up to 30%. Keith, I wanted to know your view about that increased funding to local governments, because for us who work closely with them, they think that the share of the cake is not fair to them. And I think the direct question to you, Andrew, I hope you're typing it on your phone, is what is your take about these 112 local governments currently? I'm mentioning 112 because we know that while KCC is not a local government, it's also a local government. The point is that there are very many, and there are many lined up, and we know that they are part of those that should take a part of the national cake, which we know is not enough for them. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. We'll get to Mr. Keith Muhakanizi. We had some feedback from Twitter. The first one was from Benfred Twinamasiko. The rich people in Kampala know nothing about factors of production in economics, but technocrats are poor. Dennis Bakampe, Uganda needs to export processed agricultural products like maize and juice. Twinamasiko, there is need to have more budget consultations during budget formulations. 2 minutes for each of our panelists. Starting with you, Mr. Keith Muhakanizi. You need to switch it on, or you like to stand like an evangelist. Please come.
Does this work?
Yes, our Twitter feed is it's probably too late for trading right now. Honorable Mr. Muhakanizi.
What can I say? First, I want to thank you. Certainly, I was not involved. The Minister of Finance was involved. And these people are organizing these conferences because we spend a lot of time in this country in discussing democracy. I don't know whether it's democracy, even whether you are democratic or you don't know. Therefore, for a long period, nobody could listen to us or who talk about these productive sectors and transformation which we are talking about. So I'm happy that we are now shifting back to discuss these issues that affect us, that will take us over the next 5 years. And I want to thank everybody who have turned up and the contributions. I wrote the issues you raised. But before I forget, the political economy, I just had wanted to read to you the political economy of what happens in life. So a journalist from Monta has just sent me to say MPs want your head cut off. But how can you criticize their exemption when you are just a civil servant? You are their employee. What? You are the employee. Your job is to implement. Shut up. Good. But we must pay taxes, all of us. We need to raise revenue. Mokhtara is still around, but I see some MPs here. What I said yesterday, and I insist, I stand to insist, is that the principle of taxation is, the major principle of taxation is equity. If you want people to pay taxes, they must be, all of us be seen paying taxes. If it is true that some people are paying taxes on their allowances, so it should be to everybody in the country. Period. Try whatever you want to do. Otherwise, if we are seen them paying and they are not others paying, they have tax evasion. And tax compliance will be a problem. So we need to pay taxes. Because at 13% of GDP, there is a limit in what a state can do. We need to raise this without any doubt, all of us paying taxes to at least 18 to 20%. And we cannot do this if me, Americans, I'm not seen paying taxes. So I thought I should make that one very clear to everybody. Now, I come to the priorities. Somebody raised the priorities. That you are doing everything and you should concentrate. We all always agree. But remember, at the time of budgeting, you get bogged down by a number of things you want. You talk about how many MPs. And Honorable Tembe said I was washed. Sure, my letter, which was read in the Parliament by Honorable Nsama, when they asked me for, how do you call it? Certificate of financial implication, which is raw. With all whatever happens, I said, I wrote clearly, we cannot afford more MPs. That letter was read, and it is a public document. So we stand, we fight, by the way. But let me also do this. You cannot cry for democracy, seems to me. And you don't want what goes on with the democratic society. What I did and wrote, you see, I never saw a single MP or person from the opposition criticizing, joining me to say Makani is correct. Which means politically there was a consensus that Makani's letter was wrong. We needed more MPs. And I think that's democracy anyway. I suspect, I don't know. I wrote 3 letters, no, please. But the democratic process at that particular time was such that they needed more MPs, and therefore you pay for it. So when you come down to these numbers to do the budgeting, you are bogged down by these numbers. But we agree that we need to prioritize areas. Now, on the issue of, and I get out of here, so I allow others to come in. I think that we can debate seriously now and try to, what Francis Kutesa was talking about, political accountability, is a whole area why the little money we are collecting, you taxpayers, why are we paying, for example, a Murka chief in the contemporary Africa? Why are we paying a Gombora chief? Why are we paying a school supervisor? And I agree with, I think, was it Professor Nwagaba? I disagreed with Dr. Suruma. What has failed at school level is that nobody is doing supervision. And I think we need to revisit the whole area. Why did these functions after colonial government? Apparently, the only countries which has reinforced it have done very well. Where they liberalized, where they privatized, where they are democratic, I do not know. Where they are autocratic, I don't know. What I do know today, we do know the state of Rwanda is achieving these results. We do very well that Ethiopia is achieving this. But when we come to countries like Kenya, Uganda, Malawi, Zambia, Ghana, Tanzania, apparently we are in the same category, Senegal. So the question is, without going around this one here, what happened? And how can we get civil servants like myself perform? And I think that's the whole question of political, which are questions. We need to enforce these mechanisms. To me, these are not even political. They are not, absolutely. And I know it, because I've seen it. We need now, why did these institutions decline? What can we do to get them done? And to me, that's what now at finance, we are now pioneering over the next 3 years. As priority number 1, by the way. We don't believe this requires money. We believe it is a whole area of saying you either get these results or out. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Keith Muhakanizi. Dr. Ezra Sruma is going to respond from where he is in 2 minutes.
Thank you for all the excellent comments. The issue of not following up these dialogues is important, but I think that there are roles of different publics. A discussion like this helps to clarify issues. So debate is important, and in a democracy, we have to have exchange of views as a way of arriving at the truth. I would not despair. The role of cabinet is very, very high up in the sky. At some point, what cabinet decides has to come down to what happens in the classroom, in the health center. And this is the problem, in my opinion, that management at the local level, at the local institution, cannot be done from Kampala. And there has to be some form of organizational setup that is practical, that works. We have a theory of how a firm, a company that's owned by certain people, how it is managed and how it can be efficient and how it competes. That I've spent many years studying that theory. Now, the theory of public enterprise, I do not know if there is a theory of public enterprise whereby we can say that a public enterprise which is monopolistic will be efficient. It is precisely because of the absence of that theory that we privatized. Now, I'm not saying that the capitalist model is perfect. I do see a role for government. There's no question about that. But if you see what is happening in our public institutions in rural areas, you cannot stay adamant that public management should continue and is effective. Mr. Kayondo just described the number of pupils who entered P1, I think he said 1.2 or 1.5 million, and those who eventually went to sit for the exam, 680,000. The transition from P1 to P7 or P6 is catastrophic. These children are falling out. You cannot say it's because of we don't have transformative leadership. That will not help us. We must have a method of management that is effective. And we can't wait for Messiah to come back before we can have effective management. So I beg you to reconsider that we need to revisit the issue of how we own these institutions. That there are people who own and are insisting on getting an accounting from the headmaster. People who are on the scene and can say, why have you been absent 3 times this week? Why have teachers been absent 2 times this week? And you cannot get that from Kampala. You cannot get it from an inspector at the district who is given fuel for 2 trips a month. I was told by someone in the field that when he has come 2 times, they know that now he will not come back because he doesn't have fuel. So now they stop working. So you have to be very realistic about these things. And service delivery in hospitals is even more pathetic because people die as a result of this mismanagement. And we have to resolve it practically. Thank you very much.
Dr. Ezra Sruma, thank you very much indeed. A round of applause. And as we applaud this contribution to our viewers on NTV, we have to say goodbye at this moment. The discussion continues in the room. Please stay with us. You've been tuned into the 6th annual high-level policy dialogue on the budget, organized by Acode. The theme has been Global Economic Outlook and its implications for growth of Uganda's economy. Thank you for tuning in. In the room, we'll continue. My name is Edmond Kizito. Let's have Mr. Andrew Mwenda continuing right here in the room.
NT, turning on your world.